What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Unhinged Talk. As usual, I'm your host, Patrick Hennessy, joined today by the man, Jay Lonzo. How we doing, Jalen?
Doing great. Baseball's back.
Baseball's back. We are just a few short hours away from Yankee spring training getting underway. However, before we get started about previewing Yankee spring training as a whole, guys, be sure, like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. It helps the channel out a bunch. Great to see you guys help us growing. Can't wait to post content all season, so let's just keep the ball rolling. And going back to spring training, Yankees' first spring training games today. I'm not gonna lie. Usually, like going into spring training, I don't have that high of hopes. However, this year, like I'm really excited going into Yankee spring training. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just a very different feel this year. So I don't know if that's because like last season just didn't feel like a normal season because it wasn't, but also because like the Yankees have a lot of battles going on this spring. So I kind of like want to break those down, kind of what fans should expect out of those battles. The first spring training competition that I kind of want to discuss is the bench. The Yankees have quite the competition for the final bench spot. We're assuming that they're going to go with four bench bats. One of them, Higgy, he obviously has to get it. Be the backup catcher. 2, Brett Gardner. He didn't re-sign just to get DFA'd. He's going to have a bench spot. 3 is where it gets interesting. Tyler Wade, I'm going to pencil in as the third spot on the bench just because he plays shortstop. The Yankees like his speed, but he doesn't hit. So I think if someone else maybe has a fantastic spring, that could change. But the fourth bench, I don't know whether I want to say spot or bat, but it keeps getting confused with spat. So the fourth bench spot it's probably between Tauchman, Dietrich, Bruce, Ford, and Andujar, right?
Fair.
It's going to be very interesting.
I'd throw Estrada in there just because, he could have one of those springs where he has to be in the discussion. I think Derek Dietrich is the favorite for the job. He's proved that he can come off the bench before. He's very versatile. He plays both corner outfield positions. He plays every infield position besides shortstop, which I'm sure if he really needed to, emergency situation, he could hold down shortstop. He could probably catch if you needed him to. He's one of those guys where super utility. Like anywhere you need him, you throw him in there. If he's hot, you can find a spot in the lineup for him. However, I think it could get really interesting because it's probably going to just come down to how they perform during the spring. Like I think at least between those two top guys, we know what we're going to get from them, right? So if Jay Bruce has an amazing spring, it's going to be hard for them to say, sorry, like we're going to have to let you go, or for him to let him opt out. I'd say you're going to guarantee his contract because his lefty bat, his veteran experience in the box, his ability to come off the bench. Jay Bruce is pretty versatile too. He plays both outfield corner positions and he can play first base. Not as versatile as Dietrich, but there's some value in looking at a guy like Garrett Cole, who's our ace, and Garrett Cole talking about how smart of a hitter Jay Bruce is. He could help out our younger hitters. So I wouldn't count Jay Bruce out. I know it's a long shot, but I think he's a dark horse to make it. I think guys like Estrada and Andujar and maybe Tauchman are kind of long shots just because I feel like 2020 was an opportunity for guys who were maybe fringe players to prove that they belong. Mike Ford as well. And almost every single one of them disappointed. So, they have all spring to prove that they belong. And I think Andujar is probably the longest shot for making it just because I think he's most valuable getting everyday reps in AAA. There was no AAA season last year, obviously, so it was a little bit tricky. But I think this year build his confidence up and his trade value, so that way you have options rather than having him ride the bench. He's not like a guy that you're going to bring in for a defensive replacement, so there's really no reason for him to be on this team.
Yeah, I think the battle is going to be very interesting, but I think I'd agree with you in the sense right now Dietrich has to be the favorite. And like I know a lot of people don't really discuss this a lot, but the off the field presence that Dietrich provides as well. I mean, the dude is just a beacon of personality. I mean, between his bat flips, between his clubhouse antics, I think he would be the perfect fit to like mold the clubhouse chemistry for the Yankees. And it's something that you can't really determine with a stat, but stat-wise, Derek Dietrich, I know the past couple seasons he hasn't really been that awesome with the bat, but I think his swing in Yankee Stadium, he could provide the Yankees with some serious left-handed pop off the bench. He gets on base at a decent rate too. So in a perfect world, the Yankees would be able to have both Dietrich and Bruce on the bench, which would be my ideal situation as well. But with Brett Gardner back, I don't see that happening unless the Yankees want to replace Dietrich with Wade. So if we come down to a scenario where Dietrich and Bruce both have amazing spring trainings, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what path the Yankees go down, because it's going to be tough to leave both of them off the roster as veteran left-handed bats if they both have amazing springs. It's going to come down to a really tough decision.
Yeah, I think if it really, honestly, I think it depends less on how Jay Bruce. I think, if I'm going to be honest, I really think Dietrich is almost near to a lock to make this team. He has to have like a catastrophic spring training for him to not make it, just because there's no one in front of him. So I don't think him and Tyler Wade aren't competing for a job, but I do think if Tyler Wade has a competent spring, he'll make the team, just because of the fact that he's fast, he's a good defender, and he plays shortstop. And with Gleyber Torres, we're hoping that he could bounce back and he could have a good defensive year, obviously, and hitting wise as well. But you never want to be in a situation where you can't cover a position. Every position is basically covered. Guardy can play all three outfield positions. We obviously have a backup catcher. We have somebody who can always play first, whether that's DJ. If Bruce makes the team, he could play first. If Dietrich makes the team, he could play first, second, and third base is covered. But you don't want to ever have shortstop never be an opportunity to have it not be Gleyber Torres. So
yeah,
I think it comes down to how Tyler Wade performs. If he puts the Yankees in a tough spot, we'll see. Maybe they'll have Dietrich take some reps at short during the spring training, see how he does, see how he looks.
We'll see.
That's what spring training's for. That's what's so exciting about this, is there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of guys who have something to prove. Like it's not just guys coming in, throwing their gloves down and saying that I'm starting whatever. Like, guys are coming in with something to prove, even guys who have starting jobs. Clint Frazier talked about it, like how much he wants to prove that he belongs. And, Gary has something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Voit wants to prove that his season wasn't a fluke. Gleyber is coming back, showing that last season was a fluke. Gio wants to keep proving that he's a mainstay in our lineup. Judge needs to show that he stays healthy. Same thing with Stanton. So listen, almost every one of our starters has something to prove, as well as these battles. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. However, like looking at the starting lineup this spring, it looks like everybody kind of is locked in their position. The only one that I would kind of say is like up in limbo at this point would be Gary Sanchez. However, even if he does have like a very bad spring, I think he's still going to be the starting catcher. I don't think they'll give up on him after a bad spring, but he's definitely somebody to watch to see if he's still like looks really bad at the plate in spring, just to see if that mental confidence is back. It's going to be interesting. But, I mean, first base, Luke Voit, second base, DJ, shortstop, Gleyber, third base, Gio.
Wait, you think DJ is going to start?
No, actually, no. There's no way. But looking at the outfield, you got Clint, Hicks, Judge, assuming everybody stays healthy. Moving on to the rotation, though.
Yeah.
This is where things get a little bit interesting. Cole's obviously your number one. 2, 3, wherever you want to go, Tyone, Kluber. 4 is most likely going to be Monty. The 5th spot in the rotation is the second battle that I kind of want to talk about. And while it might not be as tense as a battle as the bench spot, because I do think Deivi Garcia is kind of a lock, almost a lock for the 5th spot in the rotation, he does have some competition. And that is in the form of Yoli Chassin, who we're not going to go too deep into today because I do want to do a whole separate episode about him because I think he kind of deserves that. And I know Jalen's very high on him. But there's also Domingo Hermann and even to a lesser extent, Michael King. Also because Clark Schmidt, I think, would have been in competition for that fifth rotation spot too before he got hurt. He's essentially way out of that now. He's going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. So you're probably not even going to see him at all this spring. But going back to that 5th-man rotation spot, I do think it's Deivi Garcia's to lose. What do you think?
I know. I completely agree. I think the interesting thing about this battle, right? So a lot of this has to do with not only their performance on the field, but we're starting to get a glimpse into how the Yankees are handling off-the-field issues, right? So Domingo Hermann probably has had the worst situation, I'd say, for a Yankee in a long time. You can't really even compare it to like the steroid situations with A-Rod and Cano. Like, well, Cano wasn't on the Yankees, but just the steroid issues and cheating. Like, so you can't really compare it because it's a completely different issue.
Probably the Chapman situation was
I
the last one.
I think Chapman is probably the most comparable situation. And even that was tricky because there was conflicting reports. He wasn't even a Yankee when it happened. So the fact that this happened while he was a Yankee, and I don't want to get too deep into it because obviously it's been covered and we've talked about it, but I wonder if that weighs into their decision at all to see, are we going to just immediately keep in mind fans are back? Are we just going to immediately throw this guy who hasn't pitched in 2 years into our fifth spot in the rotation in a year that we're competing, and expose him to the fans, expose our players to having to answer questions about him every fifth day? It's something that I don't think the Yankees are going to make their final decision based upon, but I'm thinking that it might factor in. And I also just think Davy Garcia didn't give you a reason to say we need a new fifth man. I think Davy Garcia gave you reason to say, I want to see more of this guy. And I think the fifth spot in the rotation is a pretty good spot to see more of a young guy. There's not too much pressure on him. We're not asking him to be the number 2 starter in the ALDS anymore, or opener, I guess. So I think that'd be a perfect spot for him. I think if you were to bring back Herman on this 26-man roster, in the bullpen would be an ideal role. Just a little bit less pressure for him. But we'll see. I think I agree with you. Davy's the guy right now, and I think he just has to put together a consistent spring and just show that he's continuing to build, and I think we'll see him every fifth day.
Yeah. I mean, going back to Domingo Ramon, I think the situation with him and kind of like the fifth man rotation spot is, I think personally that he would probably gain the most from starting the season in AAA. Also, I mean, the fact that he hasn't pitched in 2 years, the fact that he struggled in the Dominican Winter League, I think him starting the season in AAA and kind of seeing the Yankees seeing what he's capable of, it would help the Yankees in two ways. One, you see what Domingo still has, and you kind of get his feet wet a little bit in the shallow end, which would be AAA. And two, you allow the big league team to start the season without having to carry that burden of Domingo Herman on them. Like when you first start the regular season, I can guarantee the Yankees aren't going to want their players being asked questions about Domingo Herman every game, especially like when you're just trying to get the ball rolling, you're trying to like get that clubhouse chemistry back. So I don't think that they're going to want that just yet. However, let's say Domingo does start the season in AAA. He does pretty good throughout the first month or so. I could definitely see him being called up maybe around like May or June, depending on performance, obviously.
Sure.
But Yoli Chacin is definitely another guy who has the potential to make that fifth man roster spot. We saw, I think yesterday, Aaron Boone said that he was impressed by Chacin. Chacin's like a veteran guy. He's been in the league since like 2009, I believe. Mm-hmm. He wasn't that good the past 2 seasons. I think in 2018, he was solid with Milwaukee. He made a couple postseason starts.
In 2018, not only did he had postseason experience, but he had a 3.5 ERA. I believe he won maybe 15 something games, 16.
Yeah.
And then not only that, he pitched in San Diego the year before that, 2017. Had like a 3.8 ERA, won 13 games.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that he's this guy that's going to come in and be like our number 2. He's going to jet up the rotation and take over, and I don't think that's his role, but I do think he's a guy that can if he were to be the fifth man, it's almost the opposite of Davy, right? For Davy, we slot him in at 5 because we want to see more of him, want to see what he's got, and just see what we have in a 21-year or 20-year-old prospect. Chacin would be the opposite. I think Chacin might fit well with this Yankees team, just knowing that this is a competitive team, a contending team, and a World Series caliber team, and you want a guy who's had experience in the postseason, a guy who's been around for a while, knows how to handle the ball around the fifth time around the rotation, and keep you in ball games. And he's shown that he can do it. The past 2 years have been kind of tricky. I'm sure he's dealt with a couple injuries. He's getting up there in age, so maybe he is just tiring out. It's possible. That's why you have spring training to see what he's got. Yeah. But I do genuinely think he'll have a serious chance at least making the roster. Maybe it won't be opening day, but I think they didn't bring him in for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think Chassin is a very interesting guy going into the spring, and I do want to touch on him like an entire episode later on this week. So we're definitely going to do that. But I think the final battle that I kind of want to break down, which isn't necessarily a battle, but just players to keep an eye on, are the bullpen arms that the Yankees invited to spring. A lot of low key bullpen arms got an invite to spring this year, and a few of them, just to name off rip, would be Adam Warren, Kyle Barraclaw, Nick Goody. I know that there's a couple others too. Asher Wojciechowski is even one of them as well. So I think like definitely Nestor Cortez Jr. There's a lot of guys that the Yankees just randomly invited to spring training as relievers. So I think that all of these guys, while they might not, probably won't make the opening day roster, I think it's important to keep an eye on them in the sense of there's a very good chance we will see them at some point this year, especially a guy like Kyle Barraclaw, who's coming off like a couple injury riddled seasons, down seasons, if you want to call them. But I think these are all guys that can make an impact in the bullpen at some point this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the Yankee way as recent, right? We don't just the 26-man roster for opening day is 1,000% not going to be what you see in the following months, and obviously in October, like it's almost like a 6-month long tryout for October.
Yeah.
So we have guys that we think are going to make the opening day rotation, that are going to be opening day bullpen guys and opening day bench pieces. And that's great, but it's most likely that that opening day roster is going to be based off matchups for the Toronto Blue Jays and really not much more. Maybe the first couple series they'll look at that. But when you use flexibility and guys have options and guys have opt outs and minor league deals, you can kind of you be flexible. And I think the Yankees are known for bringing in guys in the middle of the year, whether it's a young guy like when we brought up Adonis Rosa randomly to just be
Yeah.
a bullpen guy, or when we bring in a guy like Corey Gearin or Tyler Lyons. Also, Tyler Lyons is another guy who's in Yankees
Yeah.
right now. Like random guys like that. And I think we'll see a lot of that this year. And again, something that I've been stressing all year, and Brian Cashman obviously addressed in the offseason, is depth. And I think you can never have too much pitching. And obviously, some of these guys are going to end up on other rotations and other staffs. We saw with a guy like Gio Gonzalez when we brought in Gio, and we thought he could have been like a nice addition. It didn't work out. He ended up somewhere else, and that's fine. But at least you bring the guys in, you see what they got, and if they stick around, they stick around. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we brought in a lot of these I'd say like lottery ticket guys. Kyle Bearclaw could be. He has really good stuff. He could be a guy that ends up in our October bullpen. So, we'll just because they don't make the opening day roster doesn't mean they won't be here at some point contributing.
Yeah, it's going to be a very fun spring training, like I mentioned before. However, before we do wrap things up today, I just want to make one thing very clear. I know spring training, a lot of people have hot takes throughout spring training just based on players' performances. I want to make sure that everybody knows outside of like the big battles that actually mean something. So like the stats for the players that were competing in the final bench spot, or maybe even like guys who are competing in the rotation. I would take spring training stats with a grain of salt for the most part. Mainly because, like, let's say Judge has a rough spring. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to struggle this season. Same thing with guys like Gary Sanchez or Clint Frazier. Like, spring training is exactly what it is. It's spring training. Like, these guys are just getting back into the game. And we've seen it so many times. Guys either have really bad spring trainings and then have an amazing regular season, or guys have really good spring trainings and then can't do anything in the regular season. So while spring training is important in the way of players just gaining their senses back and getting a feel for the game after being off for so long, I wouldn't think too deeply into all like the advanced stats and everything for spring training.
No, yeah, I mean that's every year. Something that one of my old coaches used to tell me when I used to do spring training. We'd fly down to Florida, and play in some tournaments and some games against some schools down in Florida. And I remember I got really hot one year in spring training. I was hitting like I've never hit before. I was hitting the ball out of the park. I was feeling myself, and he benched me the game after. Like I was hot for like 4 games in a row. He hit me clean up one of the games. I was usually like 5 or 6. He put me clean up, and then he benched me, and he was just like, "It's spring training. In spring training, you don't want to suck. You don't want to be too low, and you also don't want to be too high, right? Like I feel like when you go in and you just have a consistent spring, you work on what you need to work on, you get going, get a nice rhythm, and you head into opening day level-headed. That's the best possible scenario. We saw with a guy like Greg Bird, who was a spring training MVP every year, and that doesn't always translate. So I completely agree.
Yep. However, I think the bottom line is the Yankees definitely have a lot of players to watch this spring. Honestly, I would say probably a lot more this year than many other years because they have a lot of battles going on. A lot of guys coming back from injury who we're excited to see what they're capable of. So it's definitely going to be a fun spring. Definitely stick with us throughout all spring training. We're going to be producing content all spring training heading into the regular season. Appreciate you all. Be sure, as usual, like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. We are going to be doing live pre-games, post-games. We're still going to be doing our lives every night at 9 p.m. Eastern time for the spring. And yeah, that's it. We're still going to have our daily recorded shows as well. So stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe. Have a good spring. Peace.